The War Prize. The war was over. Humanity had lost. The skies above Earth were no longer blue but filled with the dark ships of the Zyre Dominion. Their technology was far superior. Their soldiers, tall and strong, crushed human defenses with ease. The battle ended not with a bang, but with silence. A silence that screamed louder than any weapon ever could. Serena Carter stood in a line with other humans, her wrists bound by cold metal cuffs. Her green eyes burned with anger, not fear. She had fought in the war. She had watched friends die. Now she stood as a prisoner. A war prize. The Zyre soldiers, with their sharp armor and glowing eyes, walked past the line of humans. Each human was inspected, judged, and chosen. Some were taken as workers, some as slaves, and some as trophies. Serena knew what was coming. She had heard the stories. A loud voice echoed through the large hall. "Bring the war prizes forward." Serena was pushed ahead by a Zyre guard. She stumbled but did not fall. She would not give them that satisfaction. Her heart pounded, but her face stayed calm. She remembered her father's words, whispered to her before the war began. Never let them see your fear. At the end of the hall, a tall figure sat on a throne made of black stone. General Calzor. He was known across the galaxy as a ruthless leader. His armor gleamed, and his sharp features made him look more like a statue than a living being. His golden eyes watched every human brought before him. One by one, he chose his prizes. When it was Serena's turn, she walked forward with steady steps. She met his gaze, refusing to look away. The room was silent. Even the Zyre soldiers noticed her boldness. Calzor raised an eyebrow. This human was different. She was not broken like the others. She was not begging for mercy. She stood tall, her eyes filled with a fire he had never seen in a human before. He stood and walked toward her, his steps slow and deliberate. The air grew heavy. Serena clenched her fists. She hated him. She hated all of them. Calzor circled her like a predator studying its prey. "What is your name, human?" His voice was deep, almost like a growl. "Serena Carter," she replied, her voice steady. He smirked. "You do not bow. Do you not fear me?" Serena narrowed her eyes. "Fear. I lost everything because of you. What more can you take?" The room gasped. No human had ever dared to speak like this to a Zyre general. But Calzor, he laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, but one of curiosity. "I like your spirit, Serena Carter," he said. "You will be mine." The guards dragged her away. But Serena didn't fight. She kept her head high, even as fear crept into her heart. What would become of her now? As she was taken to a Zyre ship, Serena whispered under her breath, "You may have won the war, but you haven't won me." Calzor, still standing in the hall, heard her words. His smirk faded, replaced by a look of intrigue. This human would be interesting. A cage of gold. Serena Carter sat in the corner of the large chamber, her eyes scanning every detail. The walls were made of smooth, dark metal that reflected faint lights from the ceiling. The bed was far too soft, covered in silk-like fabric. A large window showed the endless stars outside. This was no prison cell. It was luxurious, almost too perfect. But Serena knew better. A cage was still a cage, no matter how golden it looked. Her heart pounded as she remembered the cold voice of General Calzor. "You will be mine." She clenched her fists tightly. She would never belong to anyone. She was a soldier, not a trophy. The door slid open with a soft hiss. A Zyre servant entered silently, placing a tray of food on the table. Strange fruits, steaming meat, and a drink that glowed faintly. The servant, a smaller Zyre with pale blue skin, avoided eye contact and left quickly. Serena stared at the food but didn't move. She didn't trust it. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her accept their kindness. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time felt strange here. Serena sat by the window, lost in thought. Memories of the war haunted her. She saw her squad mates laughing around a campfire before the final battle. She saw the moment they fell, one by one, as the Zaire invaded Earth. She saw her brother's face, his last words before he was taken away. "Keep fighting, Serena." A sharp knock on the door broke her thoughts. She turned as Calzor entered, his tall figure almost filling the doorway. His golden eyes locked onto her immediately. "You haven't eaten," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not hungry," Serena replied coldly. Calzor tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Humans need food. You will eat." Serena stood, her eyes burning with defiance. "And if I don't, will you force me?" He chuckled softly, surprising her. "No, I don't need to force you. You will eat when you're ready." She expected threats, punishment, maybe even violence. But his calmness unsettled her more than anger would have. He walked to the window, standing beside her. The silence between them was heavy. "Why me?" Serena finally asked. "Why choose me when there were hundreds of others?" Calzor's gaze remained on the stars. "Most humans we captured were broken, afraid, weak. But you stood tall even when you lost everything. I admire that." "Admire?" Serena scoffed. "Is that what you call this? I'm a prisoner, a trophy, not something to admire." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You think you are a prisoner, but look around you. I have given you freedom within my home. No chains, no guards. I have treated you with respect." Serena stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Freedom? This is not freedom. You stole my world, my people, my life. No matter how soft the bed is, I am still trapped." For a moment, Calzor was silent. Then softly he said, "You speak of chains, but I see something else. I see a fighter." Serena felt her anger boil. "A fighter you defeated." "Perhaps," he replied, "but even in defeat, your spirit remains unbroken." She turned away, unwilling to show him the tears that threatened to fall. She hated him, hated how calm he was, hated how, deep down, she felt something unfamiliar, a strange curiosity about him. Calzor walked toward the door, but paused. "I did not choose you to break you, Serena Carter. I chose you because I see something in you, something even my own people have lost." Before she could reply, he left. The door slid shut, leaving Serena alone once more. She sat back down, her mind a storm of emotions. She wouldn't trust him. She couldn't. But a small voice in the back of her head whispered, "What if he's different?" Hours later, Serena finally gave in to hunger. She tasted the strange food, finding it surprisingly good. As she ate, she couldn't stop thinking about Calzor's words. Days passed, and Serena explored the estate. She found beautiful gardens filled with alien flowers that glowed in the dark. She saw tall towers that overlooked the planet's surface, a landscape of purple skies and golden rivers. There were other humans too, but most were quiet, their eyes empty. Serena hated seeing them like that. She wanted to help them, but how? One evening, as Serena sat by the window, lost in thought, a voice startled her. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Calzor stood beside her, looking out at the stars. "Strange," Serena replied. "Not like Earth." "No," he agreed. "But sometimes, even strange places can become home." Serena turned to him, her eyes filled with unspoken questions. "Home. This will never be home for me." Calzor nodded. "I understand." For the first time, Serena saw something in his eyes. Sadness. She wondered what secrets he hid behind that cold exterior. As he left, Serena whispered to herself, "I will never belong here. But maybe I don't have to fight alone." In the shadows, Calzor heard her, and he smiled softly, knowing that the battle between them had only just begun. The chains of freedom. Serena Carter stood in the middle of the vast alien garden, her eyes scanning the glowing flora around her. The soft hum of distant machinery reminded her that even in this peaceful corner, she was still inside an enemy fortress. She let out a slow breath, her mind restless. She had to escape. She couldn't stay here, no matter how kind Kelzor seemed compared to other Zur. She paced along the stone path, her boots barely making a sound. She had explored every inch of this estate, memorizing the layout. There were no chains on her wrists, but she felt them around her mind. Every time she thought of freedom, the voice of Kelzor echoed in her head. "You are not a prisoner." Liar, she thought bitterly. But tonight would be different. Tonight, she would leave. She had studied the guards' routines, the security systems, and the hidden corners where even Zur's eyes didn't reach. Serena had always been clever. War had taught her that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about knowing when to strike. As night fell, the alien sky turned a deep violet, with 2 moons casting pale light over the landscape. Serena moved swiftly, staying in the shadows. Her heart pounded, adrenaline rushing through her veins. Every step brought her closer to the perimeter fence, a shimmering barrier of energy that kept intruders out and prisoners in. She reached the fence and pulled out a small device she had stolen from a Zire maintenance room days ago. She had spent every spare moment figuring out how it worked. Now, it was time to test it. Her fingers worked quickly, bypassing the energy field. Sparks flickered as the barrier flickered. "Almost there," she whispered to herself. Suddenly, a voice behind her froze her in place. "You're quite resourceful, Serena Carter." She spun around, fists clenched. Kelzor stood a few feet away, his golden eyes glowing softly in the darkness. His face was calm, but there was a sharpness in his gaze that made Serena's chest tighten. "Step back," she warned. "I'm leaving." Kelzor didn't move. "And where will you go? Do you know what lies beyond this estate?" "I don't care," she snapped. "Anywhere is better than being a prisoner here." He sighed softly. "You are not my prisoner, Serena." "Then let me leave," she shot back. Kelzor walked closer, slowly, like one approaching a wild animal. "If I let you leave now, you will die. The Zire beyond this place do not see you as I do. To them, you are nothing but a weak human, a war trophy with no value beyond your servitude." "I'll take my chances," she replied, though doubt flickered in her mind. Kelzor's voice softened. "You are free to leave if you truly wish, but know this, I am the only thing keeping you safe." Serena's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to believe he was just another Zur, cruel and heartless. But something in his eyes confused her. It wasn't pity. It wasn't cruelty. It was understanding. She turned back to the fence, the barrier still flickering from her work. But her hands trembled. She remembered the other humans she had seen here, broken, hopeless. She wanted to help them. She couldn't do that if she was dead. With a frustrated sigh, she deactivated the device, and the barrier returned to its full strength. She hated herself for it, but she knew escaping now would be foolish. Kelzor relaxed, his expression unreadable. "Wise choice. Don't mistake this for trust," Serena said sharply. "I'm not staying because of you. I'm staying because I have a fight to finish." A small smile tugged at Kelzor's lips. "Good. I wouldn't expect anything less from you." Days turned into weeks, and Serena found herself in a strange rhythm. She trained in the empty halls, keeping her body strong. She learned the Zire language in secret, listening to conversations when no one thought she understood. She watched Kelzor, trying to find his weaknesses, but instead, she found confusion. Kelzor was not like the Zur general she had heard about. He treated his people with respect, not fear. Even the human captives under his care were given dignity, though they still lived with chains in their minds. One evening, as she sat in the library, a place filled with strange alien books and glowing data pads, Kelzor entered quietly. Serena didn't look up, pretending to be absorbed in a holographic map of the Zire Empire. "You've been studying," he said softly. Maybe I'm planning another escape, she replied without missing a beat. Kelzor chuckled. Or maybe you're planning something bigger. She finally looked at him, her green eyes sharp. What do you want from me, Kelzor? Why keep me here? He sat across from her, his expression serious. Because you remind me of something my people have forgotten. Strength that doesn't come from power, but from resilience. Serena narrowed her eyes. And what do you want me to do with that? Kelzor leaned forward. Change things. Serena blinked, caught off guard. Change. What? The Zaire believes strength is everything. But strength without compassion is empty. I want to show them that even those they consider weak can be stronger than they ever imagined. Serena's heart raced. Was this another game? Another trap? Or was Kelzor truly different? As he left, Serena whispered to herself, I don't trust you, Kelzor. But maybe, just maybe, we want the same thing. In the darkness, a new thought formed in her mind. If I can't escape this cage, maybe I can break it from within. The breaking point. The days blurred together in Kelzor's fortress, but Serena Carter's mind was sharper than ever. She spent each moment planning, observing, and waiting. She knew something was coming, something that would test her strength and resolve. And when it did, she would be ready. But what Serena didn't expect was how quickly that moment would arrive. One afternoon, Serena stood in the training room, punching a heavy bag with focused intensity. Sweat dripped down her face, but she didn't stop. Each punch was a reminder of who she was. A soldier, not a captive. She wouldn't let herself forget that. Suddenly, the doors slid open. Serena paused, turning to see Kelzor enter, his expression unreadable as always. But today there was something different in his eyes. Something troubled. Serena, he said calmly, though she sensed tension in his voice. What now? She asked, wiping sweat from her brow. There is a problem, Kelzor replied. A Zaire noble, Lord Varric, has requested you as part of a political arrangement. He believes humans should not be given any respect or freedom, even within my estate. Serena's heart skipped a beat. And what did you tell them? Kelzor's golden eyes hardened. I refused. Serena let out a slow breath, relief washing over her for a brief moment. But then doubt crept in. Why? She asked. Why risk angering one of your own people for me? Kelzor stepped closer, his voice low but firm. Because you are not an object to be traded. And because I believe you deserve better. Serena narrowed her eyes, trying to decipher his words. She wanted to believe him, but trust didn't come easily, especially not with an alien who had once been her enemy. Varric will not accept my refusal easily, Kelzor continued. He will try to take you by force. Let him try, Serena replied fiercely. I've faced worse. Kelzor gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. I do not doubt your strength, Serena Carter, but this is not a battle you can fight alone. Serena crossed her arms, her mind racing. She didn't want to rely on him. But deep down, she knew Kelzor was right. Varric wouldn't care about her strength or resilience. To him, she was nothing more than a prize. So what's the plan? She asked reluctantly. Kelzor's expression grew serious. We prepare. And when Varric comes, we show him that neither of us will be broken. The next few days were tense. Serena noticed the increase in guards around the fortress. She heard whispers among the Zaire servants, whispers of Lord Varric's growing anger. One evening, as Serena stood by the window in her room, Kelzor entered quietly. She turned, surprised by his sudden presence. Can't sleep either, she asked, trying to hide her nervousness behind sarcasm. Kelzor chuckled softly. Sleep is a luxury I cannot afford right now. Serena sighed, leaning against the window frame. Why are you really doing this, Kelzor? Protecting me, standing against your own people. What do you gain from it? Kelzor was silent for a moment, then replied softly. When I was young, I believed strength was everything. I fought. I conquered, and I never questioned my orders. But over time, I realized, strength without purpose is empty. My people have forgotten what it means to fight for something greater than power. Serena listened carefully, her curiosity growing. He continued, when I saw you, standing defiant even in defeat, I remembered what true strength looked like. I'm not doing this because I expect something in return. I'm doing this because you deserve to be more than a symbol of our victory. Serena's heart ached at his words. She wanted to hate him, but every day that hate became harder to hold on to. Thank you, she whispered, almost too softly to hear. Kelzor nodded, then left her alone with her thoughts. The night of the confrontation arrived faster than Serena expected. She stood beside Kelzor in the grand hall, her fists clenched as the doors swung open violently. Lord Varric entered, flanked by several armed Zyre soldiers. His crimson armor gleamed under the hall's lights, and his sharp features twisted into a cruel smirk when he saw Serena. So, Varric sneered, this is the human you refuse to give up. Such a fragile thing for a general to protect. Serena stepped forward, her green eyes blazing. I'm not fragile, and I'm not yours. Varric laughed mockingly. Feisty. I like that. Kelzor's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She is under my protection. Varric, you will not take her. Varric's smirk faded. And if I do, will you wage war against your own kind for a mere human? Kelzor's golden eyes hardened. If that's what it takes. Serena felt a pang in her chest. He meant it. She could see it in his eyes. Varric's face twisted in rage. You're a fool, Kelzor. She is nothing. Just a weak, broken human. Serena stepped forward boldly. If I'm so weak, why are you so afraid of me? Varric's soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could fire, Kelzor's own guards appeared, surrounding them. The room filled with tension, both sides ready to attack. Enough. Kelzor's voice boomed. Leave now, Varric, before you regret it. Varric glared at Serena, then at Kelzor. This isn't over. As Varric stormed out, Serena let out a shaky breath. She turned to Kelzor. You really would have fought them for me. Kelzor nodded. I still will. Serena felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. As she looked into Kelzor's eyes, she whispered, maybe I don't have to fight alone anymore. The heart of a warrior. The fortress was quieter now, but the tension in the air was heavier than ever. Serena Carter stood on the balcony, looking out at the alien city below. The lights of Zyre technology flickered in the night, casting an eerie glow over everything. She could still hear Lord Varric's cruel words in her head, but more than that, she remembered Kelzor's promise. If protecting her means war, then so be it. She had fought battles before, but this felt different. This was no longer just a war between species. This was a fight for survival, for freedom, and for something Serena wasn't ready to admit yet. Trust. Kelzor found her there, silent and lost in thought. His steps were quiet, but Serena felt his presence before she saw him. You're thinking too loudly, he said softly, standing beside her. Serena smirked slightly. I didn't know thoughts made noise. Yours do, he replied, a small, rare smile on his face. They stood in silence for a moment before Serena finally spoke. Why did you really refuse, Varric? It wasn't just about me, was it? Kelzor let out a deep breath. No, it wasn't just about you. Varric represents everything I despise about my people. Arrogance, cruelty, and the belief that power makes them untouchable. Protecting you was the right thing to do, but defying him was a choice I'd wanted to make for a long time. Serena turned to face him, her green eyes searching his. And what now? You know he won't stop. You've made an enemy out of him. Out of your own kind. Kelzor nodded. I know, and I'm prepared for that. Serena crossed her arms, her mind swirling with questions. Prepared how? It's not just Varric. Others will come too. Calzor's golden eyes hardened with determination. Then we'll be ready. The next day, Serena followed Calzor through the fortress to a place she had never seen before, a vast training hall filled with advanced weapons and combat equipment. She raised an eyebrow, impressed despite herself. "You brought me here for a reason," Serena said, eyeing the weapons. Calzor nodded. "If war is coming, we need to be prepared. Together." Serena smirked. "You want me to train with you." "I want you to fight with me," he corrected. Serena's heart raced. She had trained with humans before, but never with an alien. And certainly not with someone like Calzor. But something inside her sparked at the thought. "All right," she said, picking up a sleek alien weapon. "Let's see if you can keep up." Calzor chuckled softly. "I should be the one asking you that." Their training sessions became intense. Serena pushed herself harder than ever, determined not just to survive, but to prove that humans were stronger than the Zaire believed. She was fast, precise, and relentless. And Calzor, he was powerful, disciplined, and surprisingly patient. One day, after a particularly exhausting session, Serena collapsed onto the floor, breathing heavily. Calzor sat beside her, equally worn out. "You fight well," he admitted. Serena grinned. "You're not too bad yourself, General." They sat in silence for a moment before Calzor spoke softly. "Do you miss Earth?" Serena's smile faded. She stared at the ceiling, lost in memories. "Every day." Calzor watched her carefully. "Tell me about it." Serena was surprised. "You really want to know?" He nodded. So she told him. She spoke of green forests, blue oceans, and cities that never slept. She told him about laughter, music, and the simple joy of a sunrise. And as she spoke, Calzor listened. Truly listened, as if trying to picture every detail in his mind. When she finished, there was a deep silence between them. "I wish I could have seen it," Calzor finally said. Serena looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe you still can." But peace was short-lived. A few nights later, an explosion shook the fortress. Serena jumped from her bed, grabbing the nearest weapon. She knew immediately. It was Varric. Running through the halls, Serena found Calzor already in battle gear, barking orders to his guards. "They've breached the outer wall," he said quickly. "Varric's soldiers." Serena clenched her jaw. "I'll fight." Calzor shook his head. "No, I need you safe." "Safe," she snapped. "I'm not hiding while you fight my battles." Calzor hesitated, then nodded. "Then fight with me." They moved through the fortress like a storm, taking down enemy soldiers together. Serena's human agility and sharp mind, combined with Calzor's strength, made them unstoppable. But then Serena saw him, Varric, standing on the far side of the hall, watching them with a twisted grin. "Carter," Varric shouted, his voice dripping with mockery. "Did you really think you could hide behind Calzor forever?" Serena aimed her weapon, but Varric held up a hand. In it, he held a small device, glowing dangerously. "Take another step, and I'd blow this entire fortress to dust," Varric threatened. Calzor stepped in front of Serena. "This ends now, Varric." Varric laughed cruelly. "Oh, it ends, Calzor. But not for me. Surrender the human, and I'll let your people live." Serena grabbed Calzor's arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't give in." Calzor looked at her, his voice steady. "Never." He lunged at Varric, and the battle resumed with furious intensity. Serena fought alongside him, determined to protect the only person who had ever fought for her. As the dust settled and Varric's forces retreated, Serena looked at Calzor, breathless and bruised. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. Calzor met her gaze. "Yes, I did." For the first time, Serena felt something deeper than survival. She felt seen. Love in the face of death. The fortress was quiet once again, but Serena Carter knew it was the calm before the storm. The echoes of the battle still rang in her ears, the clash of weapons, the shouts of soldiers, and the steady voice of Calzor beside her, guiding her through the chaos. She sat alone in the dimly lit training hall, staring at the weapon in her hands. She had fought for survival before, but now she fought for something more. She fought for freedom, for herself, for the human still trapped by desire. And though she wouldn't admit it out loud, she fought for him too. Calzor entered the hall silently, his golden eyes softening when he saw Serena. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "You should be resting," he said gently. "So should you," she replied, standing up. Calzor chuckled softly. "Rest is a luxury we can't afford right now." Serena nodded, the weight of their situation pressing down on her. "Varric won't stop. You know that, right?" "I know," Calzor replied. "And I'm prepared." Serena sighed. "You keep saying that. But how? It's not just Varric anymore. He'll convince others. You've made enemies within your own people." Calzor stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Then let them come. I've made my choice, Serena. I will not hand you over. Not now. Not ever." Serena's heart pounded at his words. She wanted to argue, to push him away. But deep down, she knew she didn't want him to stop fighting for her. She didn't want to be alone anymore. Over the next few days, Serena and Calzor prepared for the inevitable. Calzor's loyal guards reinforced the fortress, while Serena worked with the human captives, training them in secret. She saw the hope in their eyes, a hope that hadn't existed before. One night, Serena stood on the rooftop, looking at the stars. She thought of Earth, of her family, of the life she had lost. She didn't hear Calzor approach until he was beside her. "Do you ever wonder if there's a place where all of this doesn't matter?" Serena asked softly. Calzor nodded. "I do. But I also know that running from our battles doesn't make them disappear." Serena smirked. "Always the warrior." Calzor chuckled. "And you are not." Serena's smile faded. "I don't know what I am anymore." Calzor turned to her, his voice gentle. "You are Serena Carter, a fighter, a survivor. And more than that, you are the reason I still believe in something greater than war." Serena looked at him, her defenses slowly crumbling. "Why me, Cal? Out of all the humans you could have chosen, why me?" Calzor's golden eyes softened. "Because you never gave up. Even when everything was taken from you, you fought back. You showed me that strength isn't just about power, it's about heart." Serena felt a tear slip down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but Calzor had already seen it. "You're not as heartless as you pretend to be," she whispered. "And you're not as fearless as you pretend." Calzor replied softly. They stood in silence, the weight of their unspoken feelings hanging between them. The next day, Serena's fears became reality. Calzor's chief commander, a fierce Zoyar named Ralvik, entered the war room with grim news. "Varric has rallied other nobles. They are coming," Ralvik said. Calzor's expression hardened. "How many?" "Enough to overwhelm us," Ralvik replied. "Unless we surrender Serena Carter." Serena, standing at the back of the room, clenched her fists. "That's not happening." Calzor nodded. "Agreed." Ralvik hesitated. "With all due respect, General, protecting the human at the cost of your people's safety is dangerous." Calzor's voice was sharp. "Protecting Serena is protecting our future. If we give in to tyranny now, we lose everything we stand for." Ralvik sighed. "Then we fight." The battle began at dawn. Serena stood beside Calzor, leading a small group of human fighters. They were outnumbered, but they fought with everything they had. Serena moved through the battlefield with precision, taking down enemies with swift, calculated strikes. Calzor fought fiercely, his armor gleaming as he clashed with Varric's forces. But even with their combined strength, Serena knew this battle wasn't just about weapons. It was about willpower. Amidst the chaos, Serena spotted Varric, standing atop a high platform, watching the battle with a cruel smile. "Stay with the others," Serena shouted to Kalzor as she sprinted toward Varric. "Serena!" "No!" Kalzor called after her, but she was already gone. Serena climbed the platform, breathing heavily as she faced Varric. "Brave, but foolish," Varric sneered. Serena raised her weapon. "Let's finish this." Varric lunged at her, but Serena dodged, countering with a swift kick. The two fought fiercely, but Serena was fueled by something Varric couldn't understand: hope. As Varric knocked her weapon away, Serena grabbed a hidden blade from her boot, stabbing him in the side. He roared in pain, stumbling back. Kalzor arrived just in time to see Serena deliver the final blow, knocking Varric unconscious. Breathing heavily, Serena looked at Kalzor. "Told you I could handle it." Kalzor smiled. "I never doubted you." The battle was won, but Serena knew the war wasn't over. As she stood beside Kalzor, looking out at the stars, she whispered, "What now?" Kalzor took her hand gently. "Now we fight for a future where neither of us has to be afraid." Serena squeezed his hand, a soft smile on her lips. "Together." "Together," Kalzor echoed, defying fate. The battlefield was silent now, but Serena Carter knew silence was never the end. It was the beginning of something new. She stood beside Kalzor, her body aching from the fight, but her mind sharper than ever. She had faced death, stared into the eyes of her enemies, and survived. But survival wasn't enough anymore. She wanted more. She wanted freedom, not just for herself, but for every human held under the Zyre Dominion's control. And she wanted to prove that humanity was more than what the Zyre believed. Kalzor stood beside her, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. The stars above them sparkled like distant memories, and for the first time in a long time, Serena felt hope. But hope alone wouldn't win this war. In the days after the battle, the fortress became a place of whispered plans and quiet preparation. Serena worked with Kalzor and his trusted commander, Ralvik, to gather their allies. There were Zyre who believed in Kalzor's vision of a different future, and humans who were ready to fight for their freedom. Serena stood in the war room, her fingers tracing over a holographic map of the Zyre Dominion. "If we hit them here," she said, pointing to a supply base, "we cut off their resources." Kalzor nodded. "But that will draw their attention to us." "Good," Serena replied with a smirk. "Let them come." Ralvik chuckled. "She's more Zyre than human sometimes." Serena raised an eyebrow. "I'll take that as a compliment." Kalzor watched her with quiet admiration. She was fierce, determined, and unbreakable. She had become more than just a fighter. She had become a symbol, and he knew symbols could inspire revolutions. That night, Serena couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony, looking at the stars, lost in thought. Thinking loudly again. Kalzor's voice broke the silence. Serena smiled softly. "It's becoming a habit." He stepped beside her, his presence comforting. "What's on your mind?" "Everything," she admitted. "What if we fail? What if all of this is for nothing?" Kalzor placed a hand on her shoulder gently. "We won't fail." Serena looked at him, searching his face for answers. "How can you be so sure?" "Because we're not just fighting with weapons," he replied. "We're fighting with our hearts. And that is something they can never take from us." Serena's heart raced at his words. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. "You believe in me more than I believe in myself," she whispered. Kalzor turned to her, his golden eyes soft. "Because I see what you can't. I see the fire inside you, and I know that fire will never burn out." Serena felt a lump in her throat. She had lost so much, but here, with him, she had found something she never expected: love. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "So am I," Kalzor replied. "But we face our fears together." Serena nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. In that moment, she knew they were unstoppable, not because they were strong, but because they had something worth fighting for. The day of the rebellion arrived. Serena stood at the front of the gathered humans, her voice steady as she addressed them. We've been broken, we've been beaten, but we are not defeated. Today, we show them that humanity is not weak. We are survivors. We are fighters, and we will not be chained any longer. The crowd erupted in cheers, their spirits ignited by Serena's words. Kelzor approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Ready? Always, Serena replied with a smirk. The battle that followed was unlike any Serena had ever seen. Humans and Zur fought side by side, united by a shared vision of freedom. Serena moved through the battlefield with precision, taking down enemies with swift strikes. Kelzor fought beside her, his strength unmatched. But the enemy was relentless. Varric's forces were many, and they fought with the desperation of those unwilling to lose power. Serena found herself cornered, outnumbered. She fought fiercely, but it wasn't enough. A Zyre soldier raised his weapon, ready to strike. And then Kelzor was there, blocking the blow with his own body. Kale, Serena shouted, her voice filled with panic. He turned to her, blood dripping from his side. I'm fine, he grunted. But Serena knew he wasn't. With renewed fury, Serena fought back, taking down the remaining enemies. She knelt beside Kelzor, tears streaming down her face. You idiot, she whispered. Why did you do that? Kelzor smiled weakly. Because I couldn't lose you. Serena's heart ached. You're not losing me. Not now. Not ever. In the aftermath of the battle, the rebellion stood victorious. Varric was defeated, and the Zyre dominion was fractured. Serena and Kelzor stood together, looking at the horizon. What now? Serena asked softly. Kelzor squeezed her hand gently. Now we build a new future. Together. Serena smiled. Together. As they stood there, side by side, Serena knew their fight wasn't over. But she also knew that with Kelzor beside her, they could face anything. Because love, she realized, was the strongest weapon of all.